Amelia Vance lived 12 floors above the city, but she might as well have been on the moon. From her penthouse apartment, 12A, the world was a silent, glittering map of destinations she owned but never truly visited. Her home was a testament to brutalist minimalism. Concrete floors, glass walls, and furniture so artfully sparse it seemed to apologize for its own existence. It was a fortress of success, and inside its walls, she was profoundly, achingly alone. She had a board of directors, a legion of employees, and a portfolio that could swallow smaller nations, but she had no one. Not since Julian. She often saw them in the hallway, the man and his boy from 12F, the shoebox unit at the far end of the corridor. She knew them only as a quiet presence, a stark contrast to the boisterous brokers and transient socialites who occupied the other suites. The man, tall and broad-shouldered, had a stillness about him, a kind of rooted calm that felt alien in this building of anxious ambition. His son was a small shadow at his side, always clutching a sketchbook, his large, dark eyes absorbing everything in absolute silence. Amelia, in her tailored suits and sharp heels, would offer a curt, professional nod, her mind already 3 meetings ahead, and they would fade from her thoughts as quickly as they appeared. They were ignorable, part of the background hum. Until the night the city went dark. A transformer blew somewhere in the concrete jungle below, and the building, a beacon of modern technology, was plunged into a primitive, suffocating blackness. The backup generators failed. Amelia was halfway to the elevator when the world vanished. A primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced the armor of her composure. The darkness was absolute, pressing in, stealing the air from her lungs. It wasn't the dark she feared, but the sudden, total loss of control. A choked gasp escaped her lips. "Ma'am, are you all right?" A voice cut through the black. It was calm, deep, and close. Before she could answer, a soft, warm light bloomed nearby. It wasn't the harsh, sterile beam of a smartphone. It was the steady, gentle glow of a hand-crank lantern. In its light stood the man from 12F. His son was beside him, holding the lantern, his small face a mask of solemn concentration. "The emergency brakes on the elevator will have engaged. Best to take the stairs, but we should check on the others first," the man said, his voice an anchor in the disorienting void. He didn't wait for her permission. He simply included her in the we. He began knocking on doors, his voice reassuring, organizing a small, frightened collective of her neighbors. Amelia, the titan of industry who could command a room of 1,000 investors, found herself silently following him, drawn to the small circle of light held by a silent child. He was Marcus, she learned. The boy was Leo. In the terrifying absence of power, Marcus possessed it all. He was competent, calm, and kind. And for the first time, Amelia Vance felt the profound, humbling weight of her own inadequacy. The encounter was a crack in the glass wall of her life, and through it, a sliver of warmth had begun to seep in. A few days later, the memory of the blackout lingered like a phantom limb. The power was back. The city hummed its usual tune, but the silence in Amelia's apartment felt different. It was no longer a symbol of peace and control, but of emptiness. Driven by an unfamiliar impulse, a mix of gratitude and a strange, unnameable curiosity, she found her way to the building's rooftop. It was a neglected space, a concrete slab with a few derelict planters filled with weeds. And there, in the middle of the urban decay, were Marcus and Leo. Marcus was on his knees, his hands covered in grease, tinkering with the guts of an old, rusted water pump. Leo sat cross-legged a few feet away, his sketchbook open on his lap, meticulously drawing the skyline. He didn't look up as she approached. "I wanted to thank you," Amelia began, her voice sounding unnaturally formal in the open air. "For the other night. You were very capable." Marcus looked up, wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his jeans. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Just a bit of practice. Things break. You learn to fix them," he gestured toward the planters. "Figured I'd try to fix this too. This place could be something." Amelia looked at the cracked pots and withered soil. She saw only a failed project, a liability. It's been like this for years. The building association gave up on it. Doesn't mean it can't be brought back, he said simply, turning a wrench. The conviction in his voice was quiet but absolute. It was the voice of a man who believed in restoration. She watched him for a moment, his focused, efficient movements. He wasn't trying to impress her or make small talk. He was simply working, existing in his own sphere of quiet purpose. She glanced at Leo. The boy's pencil moved with incredible speed and precision. He was drawing a plane, an F-22 Raptor, its angle sharp and deadly, soaring over the buildings he could see from the roof. The detail was astonishing. "He's very talented," Amelia said, her voice softer now. Marcus's gaze softened as he looked at his son. "He has a good eye. Sees the world in lines and angles most people miss." He paused, then added, a gentle hedge around a painful truth. "He speaks with his hands." Amelia understood. She didn't press. She simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the space he had created around his son's silence. An awkward quiet fell between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. A gentle breeze swept across the rooftop, carrying the distant sound of traffic. For the first time in years, Amelia wasn't thinking about stock prices or quarterly reports. She was thinking about rust and soil and a silent boy who drew warplanes in the sky. "Do you need any help?" she asked, the words surprising her as much as they seemed to surprise him. Marcus stopped his work and looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time. He saw past the expensive suit and the guarded expression. He saw a flicker of something lost. "Sure," he said, his smile genuine this time. "You can start by pulling some of these weeds." The following Saturday, Amelia found herself on her knees in the dirt, wearing a pair of old jeans she hadn't touched in a decade. It was clumsy, unfamiliar work. Her manicure was ruined within minutes. Her muscles ached in protest. But as she worked alongside Marcus, a strange sense of rightness settled over her. They didn't talk much. The shared labor was its own language. Leo would occasionally wander over, inspect their progress, and then return to his drawing, a silent supervisor. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling board meeting where the specter of Julian Croft's rival company had loomed large, Amelia fled to the roof. She didn't expect to see them. It was a weekday, but they were there. Marcus was sanding down old wooden planks to rebuild the planters, and Leo was coloring in one of his drawings. The stress of her day was a physical weight, a tightness in her chest. Marcus saw it instantly. He set down his sander. "Rough day at the office." She gave a tight, brittle laugh. You could say that. She sank onto a bench, rubbing her temples. The carefully constructed dam of her composure was cracking. "It's complicated. Most things worth a damn are," he said, sitting a respectful distance away. He didn't pry or offer platitudes. He just waited. And in that patient silence, the story spilled out of her. She didn't name Julian, but she spoke of a partner, both in business and in life. She spoke of shared dreams, of building something from nothing. And then she spoke of the betrayal, the theft of her ideas, the public humiliation, the cold, calculated way he had tried to erase her from her own success story. She spoke of the fortress she had built around herself since, the relentless drive to prove him wrong, to become so successful, so untouchable, that no one could ever hurt her again. "And now," she finished, her voice barely a whisper, "he's back, trying to take the one thing I have left." Marcus listened, his expression unchanging, his presence a solid, unwavering thing. When she was done, he was quiet for a long moment. "Sounds to me like he already took the most important thing, and you've been trying to win it back from him ever since," he said softly. "But maybe he's not the one who has it." His words struck her with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't talking about the company. He was talking about her trust, her vulnerability, her heart. He saw the real wound, the one she kept hidden beneath layers of wealth and power. In the warmth of his small apartment kitchen later that evening, after he'd insisted on making her a cup of chamomile tea while Leo slept soundly in the next room, the feeling intensified. His home was the antithesis of hers. It was small, cluttered, and alive. Tools lay on the counter next to Leo's drawings. The air smelled of sawdust and lemon oil. Every clock on the wall, and there were many in various states of repair, ticked with a gentle, reassuring rhythm. It was the sound of life, patient and persistent. It was the sound of a home. A routine began to form, as natural and unplanned as a vine finding its way toward the sun. Amelia would find reasons to leave her sterile office early, drawn to the rooftop garden. It was transforming. Marcus, with his patient hands, had repaired the pump. They had laid fresh soil. Amelia, using her formidable research skills, had ordered heritage seeds, learning the difference between perennials and annuals. The rooftop was becoming an oasis, a riot of green shoots and stubborn blossoms. Their conversations deepened in the shared space. She learned about his life in the Air Force, his skill as an avionics technician working on the most advanced aircraft in the world. He spoke of the camaraderie, the sense of purpose, and she, in turn, spoke of the thrill of her own work, the intellectual challenge of building a company, of creating something new. They were from different worlds, yet they found common ground in the language of creation and repair. Leo was the bridge between them. He slowly, cautiously, began to let Amelia into his world. It started with a drawing. One afternoon, he tugged on her sleeve and presented her with a detailed sketch of a bee pollinating one of the new lavender plants. She had it framed and hung it on her vast, empty living room wall. It was the first piece of genuine warmth the apartment had ever known. Then, one day, as she struggled to tighten a loose hose fitting, Leo silently walked over, picked up the correct wrench from the toolbox, and placed it in her hand. His small fingers brushed against hers. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a seismic shift. Amelia found herself changing. The hard edges of her ambition were softening. She started delegating more at work, leaving at 5 o'clock, a previously unthinkable act. She traded her stilettos for practical boots. The joy she felt seeing a tomato seedling sprout was more profound than any multi-million-dollar deal she had ever closed. She was rediscovering a part of herself she thought had died with Julian's betrayal, the part that could feel simple, uncomplicated happiness. One evening, as the sun bled orange and purple across the sky, painting the glass towers of the city in hues of fire, they sat together on the bench, watching Leo chase a butterfly. The garden was thriving around them, a testament to their shared effort. "He seems happier," Amelia said quietly. "He is," Marcus replied, his eyes on his son. "You're good for him. For us," he took a deep breath, as if steeling himself. "I haven't told you why he's quiet." Amelia turned to him. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said. He told her about his ex-wife, a woman who loved the idea of a hero in uniform but couldn't handle the reality of a military family. He spoke of long deployments, of missed milestones. And he spoke of the day he came home to an empty apartment and a note on the table. Leo was 4. He'd found the note first. He hadn't spoken a word since. "The doctors called it traumatic selective mutism," Marcus said, his voice thick with a pain that was clearly still raw. "He just shut down. I had a choice. Re-enlist, climb the ladder, maybe make Chief Master Sergeant. Or get out, be here for him every single day, and try to build a world for him that felt safe enough to speak in again. It wasn't a choice." Amelia felt a wave of profound respect and a fierce, protective ache in her chest. This man had sacrificed his ambition, his career, his entire world, for his son. He had quietly, without fanfare, made the kind of choice she was terrified of. He had chosen love over everything else. As if on cue, her phone buzzed, a viper in their Eden. It was an alert from her legal team. The screen glowed with the cold, clinical language of a corporate attack. Julian Croft had launched a hostile takeover bid. He was using her own stolen initial code, her own seed of an idea, as the foundation of his claim that her company's core technology was fraudulently developed. The battle she had been dreading was no longer on the horizon. It was at her door. The next 48 hours were a blur of war room meetings, legal consultations, and frantic calls to shareholders. Julian was playing dirty, leaking fabricated stories to the press, sowing doubt among her investors. He was a shark who smelled blood, and he was circling. The pressure was immense, a physical crushing weight that threatened to extinguish the fragile flame of hope that had kindled inside her. Then Julian appeared in person. He cornered her in the lobby of her office building, all smug charm and predatory confidence. "Amelia, Amelia," he said, shaking his head with faux sympathy. "You've put up a good fight, but we both know how this ends. Get out of my way, Julian. I'm offering you a way out. A golden parachute," he purred. "Merge with me. I'll make you a figurehead, give you a seat on the board. You'll be richer than you ever dreamed. All you have to do is surrender. Otherwise, I will burn everything you've built to the ground, and I'll enjoy every second of it." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "I saw you, by the way, on that roof, playing in the dirt with that mechanic and his broken kid. You've gone soft, Amelia, and in our world, soft things get eaten." His words hit their mark. He had not only attacked her life's work, he had desecrated the one pure, good thing she had found. The poison of his cynicism seeped into her, reigniting old fears, old insecurities. Was he right? Had she lost her edge? She retreated. The walls of her penthouse, once a symbol of her power, now felt like a prison. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with the ghosts of her failures and the mocking echo of Julian's voice. When Marcus knocked on her door that evening, a plate of food in his hands and concern etched on his face, she couldn't bring herself to answer. She stood on the other side of the door, her hand pressed against the cold steel, listening to his footsteps retreat down the hall. She was shutting him out, shutting out the light, choosing the familiar darkness of her fortress because she was terrified that Julian was right. To fight him, she would have to become him. And to love Marcus, she would have to give up the fight entirely. The choice seemed impossible, a schism in her very soul. She felt herself breaking apart. The day of the emergency board meeting arrived gray and rain-lashed. Amelia sat at the head of the long, polished table, the merger agreement lying in front of her like a death warrant. Her lawyers had advised her it was the only way to salvage any value for the shareholders. A public fight would be ugly, protracted, and likely unwinnable, given Julian's campaign of misinformation. Her face was a pale, emotionless mask. She had decided to sign. She would take the money, retreat to some private island, and let the world she had built turn to ash. It was a surrender cold and complete. Her hand reached for the pen. The room was silent, the board members watching her with a mixture of pity and expectation. As her fingers brushed the cool metal of the pen, her phone vibrated on the table. An unread message. It was from Marcus. Against her better judgment, her thumb swiped across the screen. It was a picture, a drawing from Leo's sketchbook. It depicted three figures, a tall man, a woman with her hair pulled back, and a small boy, standing on a rooftop garden bursting with colorful, oversized flowers. Above them, a brilliant yellow sun smiled down. Below the drawing, in the shaky, hesitant script of a child just learning to write, was a single word. Home. Something inside Amelia broke. Not with a crash, but with a quiet, powerful surge of clarity. Julian had taken her company, her past, her reputation. But this was her future. This was real. The stocks, the shares, the glass towers, they were just things. Home was not a place you owned. It was a place you belonged. At that exact moment, a deep, earth-shaking roar filled the sky. Everyone in the boardroom looked toward the massive windows. It was Fleet Week, and a squadron of F-22 Raptors was screaming across the cityscape in a tight formation, a display of breathtaking power and precision. From her window, Amelia could see her own building, and on the rooftop garden, two small figures were looking up. She knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that Marcus was watching those planes. He had told her about them, the impossible physics of their flight, the way they felt like an extension of the pilot's own will. They were a part of his old life, a life of honor and service he had left behind. On the roof, Marcus watched the jets tear through the clouds. A lifetime of memories flooded back. On a sudden impulse, he ran to his small workshop shed and retrieved a high-powered signal lamp, a relic from his service days. He knew the flight path, knew the frequencies, knew the unofficial call-in response protocols used by pilots and ground crews. It was a long shot, a message in a bottle thrown into the sky. He aimed the lamp and flashed a specific, complex sequence toward the lead fighter. A call sign, a squadron number, a greeting. Viper 1, this is Groundhog. Welcome home. Inside the cockpit of the lead F-22, the pilot's eyes caught the flash from the rooftop below. It wasn't random. It was a clear, crisp military signal. A ghost from the grid. He smiled. On his comm, he spoke to his wingman. Viper 2, see that signal? We've got a brother down there. Tip the wings on the next pass. Show some respect. In the penthouse of 12D, retired Air Force General Carmichael was watching the airshow with his grandchildren. He saw the jets make their second pass. He saw the lead fighter dip its wing in a distinct, unmistakable salute directly over their building. And he saw the faint, answering flash of a signal lamp from the roof. His eyes narrowed. He knew that signal. He knew that salute. Back in the boardroom, Amelia Vance lowered her phone. She looked at Julian, his smug smile already celebrating his victory. She pushed the unsigned contract back across the table. The deal is off, she said, her voice clear and steady. A murmur went through the room. Julian's smile vanished. What did you say? I said, the deal is off, she repeated. She stood up, her entire bearing changed. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, righteous anger. You see, Julian, you were right about one thing. I had gone soft. I had allowed myself to believe that integrity and kindness were weaknesses. But I see now they are the only strengths that matter. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a slim data drive. This contains the original, time-stamped source code for our platform. My source code. It also contains every email, every message, where you tried to extort and blackmail me. I was too afraid and too proud to use it before. I'm not anymore. I may lose this company, but I will not lose myself. Not again. She had chosen. She chose the garden over the boardroom, the man who fixed broken things over the man who broke them, the silent boy's drawing of home over a kingdom of glass and steel. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Faced with irrefutable evidence of fraud and extortion, Julian Croft's empire imploded. The board, galvanized by Amelia's courage, threw their full support behind her. They not only weathered the storm but emerged stronger, with a renewed sense of purpose and a leader they finally, truly respected. But Amelia wasn't there for the victory speeches. The moment the meeting adjourned, she left. She didn't even take the elevator. She ran down the hall to the fire stairs, her heels clacking in urgent rhythm on the concrete. She burst onto the rooftop, breathless, her hair wild from the wind. Marcus and Leo were there, packing up the signal lamp. An older, distinguished-looking man was with them. He saw Amelia approach, then turned back to Marcus, his back ramrod straight. He raised his hand in a crisp salute. It's an honor, Sergeant Thorne, General Carmichael said, his voice gravelly with respect. Thank you for your service. Marcus, looking stunned, returned the salute. Sir. The general nodded, smiled at Leo, and then discreetly took his leave. Amelia walked toward them, her heart feeling too big for her chest. Marcus turned to her, a question in his eyes. Amelia? What happened? She didn't answer with words. She crossed the remaining distance between them, cupped his face in her hands, and kissed him. It was a kiss of desperation and relief, of gratitude and promise. It was the kiss of a woman coming home. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I chose us, she whispered. I choose this. Leo, who had been watching them with wide, serious eyes, stepped forward. He reached out and took Amelia's hand. He looked up at her, and for the first time in 3 years, he spoke to someone other than his father. His voice was small, a little rusty, but perfectly clear. Amelia! Tears streamed down her face as she knelt and pulled him into a hug, burying her face in his hair. Marcus's strong arms enveloped them both, a circle of safety and love under the vast, open sky. 1 year later, the rooftop garden was a paradise. Sunflowers tracked the lazy arc of the summer sun. Tomato vines hung heavy with ripe fruit, and the air was thick with the scent of lavender and mint. Amelia Vance, now the celebrated CEO of a company lauded for its ethical practices, was on her knees in the dirt, showing a chattering, laughing Leo how to tell if a watermelon was ready to be picked. She worked a great deal less now and loved a great deal more. Across the garden, Marcus stood in the doorway of his new workshop. Thorn and Son Restorations was thriving, a small but renowned business that brought beautiful, broken old things back to life. Amelia had been his first investor. He watched his son and the woman he loved, their heads close together, their laughter mingling with the buzz of the bees. The ticking of the antique clocks behind him was a steady, comforting heartbeat. He walked over to them, his hand resting on Amelia's shoulder. She looked up at him, her face radiant, free of the shadows that had once haunted her eyes. They had found each other in the silent, sterile hallways of a lonely building, two people broken in different ways by the world. And here, on this rooftop, surrounded by the life they had nurtured together, they had repaired not just a garden, but each other's hearts. They had built more than a sanctuary.